Etiquette Rebbes Rebbetzin, whose name was Rebbetzin Chamadino, lived upstairs in 770 on the second floor. She passed away on Seder B'Tevis Tafshin Lamarav, the 10th day in the month of Tevis in the year 1971, which is probably the end of January of 71. For those who do not know, the Rebbe Chamadino was completely deaf for many, many years. Probably from Russia yet. She couldn't hear anything. She was always involved in every conversation, and if you tried to disinvolve her, she would tell you. But because she was deaf, and she told you very loud, because she couldn't hear herself. So she was involved in every conversation. She knew how to read lips, and during the week she walked around with a tablet. She would talk to you and you had to write for her. Just a sweet little story. I like to share things. Chaim Baruch Havashtam told me that he was upstairs in the second floor when the Rebbe was walking out of the apartment after a Yom Tov. And the Rebbe Chamadina, the Rebbe's mother-in-law, said to the Rebbe, "Vos lichton wegen Avdollah." The Rebbe knew she couldn't hear. So the Rebbe went like this with his hand. And she said, "Tei," meaning Shabek Avdollah and tea, and the Rebbe nodded. It's a little story. No one else is going to tell it to you, so I'm telling it to you. He witnessed this. He watched this happen. Where she said to the Rebbe, "What should you do about Avdollah?" She was alone. And the Rebbe went like this. She said, "Tei?" And he said, "Yeah." Anyway, she made a Seder Shabbos always. She always had 10 people at her table. And they would bench for the minyan. I think she did it every Shabbos. But the Rebbe didn't go every Shabbos. The Rebbe went Yom Tov. The 4 meals of Rosh Hashanah, the meal of Yot Matzah Yom Kippurim, which is the one we have pictures of. There are a few pictures of the Rebbe sitting upstairs by Yesod, by Friedrich and Rebbe. Those are from Matzah Yom Kippur. Then there were the 8 meals of Sukkot, and could be also Shabbos Chalameid Sukkot, which makes it 10 meals. Then the 8 meals of Pesach, and the 4 meals of Shavuos. And the Rebbe sat in the same place where he sat during the physical lifetime of the Friedrich Rebbe. The Stalova, the kitchen, the dining room, is in the back of the house. It faces Union Street. I don't know if you have ever taken a tour of 770, walked around the building. If you walk around the side of 770 in the back, you'll see, if you look up, there's a very big porch.
The porch is the first floor.
The third floor is the porch. The porch in the back. So the second floor is beneath the porch. The dining room faces Union Street. The Friedrich Rebbe dining room, which runs the whole width of the house, east to west, from Kingston to Brooklyn. It's a pretty large room. I've been in that room many times. It faces Union Street. What faces Eastern Parkway, in other words, if you face the front of 770, above our Rebbe's office, that means the left side is the Friedrich Rebbe's bedroom. Above what is now the secretary's office is the Friedrich Rebbe's office, which is actually, it's a very pretty room. It's a lot nicer than our Rebbe's office. It's bigger and nicer. If I'm not mistaken, behind the Friedrich Rebbe's office, towards Union Street, is the bedroom that belonged to the Friedrich Rebbe's mother, whose name was Rebbe Shtender Soda. She passed away in 1942. I was in that room, probably in the late 70s. They have not touched the room. The bed is still sitting there, made like it was when she passed away. Now it's 81 years since she passed away. Her bed is still sitting there, and in the Friedrich Rebbe's bedroom, there's 2 beds that the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin used. They're still sitting there. When I was a child, before locks, I love to say this to young people. I think you should hear this. When I was a kid growing up, Kinderlach 770 was not locked. Period. I mean, they probably closed the front door at night. But we came at 770, every door in the building was open. The mosquitoes was no buzz. You walked into the mosquitoes, the secretary's office. The only room that was locked was the Rebbe's own office. The little room leading to the Rebbe's room, Gan Eden HaTachton, was never locked. We used to play in there as kids. There were 2 sets of stairs. We used to run around 2 sets of stairs right outside the Rebbe's door. You could walk up to the 3rd floor, no one stopped you. 770 was open. And the reason I think this is important is because I think that Rebbe felt that 770 should be open because it's our house. We grew up in 770 as children, and I'm a little young for this, but you speak to people younger than I. If your father is 10 years older than I am, I'm 57, he played in 770 all over. And 770 was it's almost as if it was made for us to play it. Now, we did a lot of stupid things. Machon, we used to take the elevator, which was never locked, to the 3rd floor, And Chana Garai, she was I didn't know who she was. It was an old lady. We'd come out of the elevator, she'd scream at us. So we'd scream back at her, go up and down. And the locks in 770 were not put in until the 80s, till after my bar mitzvah, well after my bar mitzvah. The locks were put in because some clown called the police on the Rebbe for whatever Avedi he decided the Rebbe did. So they put locks on the doors. But I want you to know that more than 30 years after the Rebbe became a Rebbe, you could walk almost any place in 770. Only door in 770 really had a lock was Rebbe's office. And I'm wondering when that lock was put on. 770 was open. We were able to go into 770. Now, they did put locks eventually on the doors. The Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment was locked. But Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, girls, listen to this. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they had a minyan in the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment. And we knew about this. Now, we didn't daven at that minyan. We davened downstairs in the Rebbe shul. But it's our custom, kids, I'm talking before my mitzvah, whatever, whether we're eating or not eating, I don't know what age it was. After Musaf, you went upstairs to Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment, and you took a tour. There was not a locked room in that house. I walked into the Frierdiker Rebbe's Yechidus Zimmer. I could have opened the shelves with the Sfarim. Nothing was locked. I could have taken a sefer. That's how it was as late as probably 1976, 77. You understood that you don't take anything. But I was in Frierdiker Rebbe's room. I could have sat down in his chair. And that's how it was. 770, all the locks in 770 were added because of extraneous things. But as a child, I was Frierdiker Rebbe's dida. I wasn't just in the dining room. When you do a tour of Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment, take you into the dining room. I was in his bedroom. I literally was in Frierdiker Rebbe's bedroom. And it was in the Rebbe's Shtena. So I remember as a kid, nothing was locked. You walked into the kitchen, you walked through this door and this door. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I feel like it's an insight into how the Rebbeim thought. The Rebbe felt this is our place. The Rebbe's Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment was not open all the time, but I walked in Frierdiker Rebbe's, you couldn't get into the Frierdiker Rebbe's Yechidus Zimmer today if you paid. Everything is locked down with gates and doors. It wasn't that way, Amol. It really, really wasn't that way. Anyway, so the dining room is facing Union Street, the back of the house. And the Rebbe came there for all the meals of Yom Tov. All the meals of Yom Tov. Rosh Hashanah, Matzah Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, the Rebbe went to the Shviger. Shabbos not. There were other times, by the way, that the Rebbe went upstairs. The Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe in the Medina used to make a Yud Shvat gathering. In other words, before the Rebbe's Fabrengen, sometime like at 6 o'clock in the evening, she made a Yud Shvat gathering, and the Rebbe would go sit upstairs. She made a Yud Bris Tammuz gathering, and maybe other times. There's actually a tape of one of these events. The Rebbe would go upstairs and sit in the same seat he sat b'chai for Frierdiker Rebbe and not move a muscle. He sat there like as if the Frierdiker Rebbe is still sitting at the table. He would frequently look at the empty chair. The way the Rebbe sat on Frierdiker Rebbe's tish, not just when the Frierdiker Rebbe was physically present, but after the Histalkus, was awesome. The Derech Eretz. When they used to have these Fabrengen Nishn upstairs, the Rebbe would go upstairs and he would sit. They would sing a few Nagunim, and no one said a word. And he would leave. The Rebbe was really, the Rebbe in the presence of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and that table was to him the presence of the Frierdiker Rebbe, was very, very filled with yira. He sat there, as the expression of the Gemara is, the kafeh shedet, he's being forced. He sat there with great trepidation, and he didn't really do any talking. And the same is true of the meals of Yom Tov. The Rebbe sat there quite uncomfortable. Now I want to throw something else in. There was a Yid whose name was Rabbi Mentlik, Mordechai Mentlik, who the Rebbe called Mein Motel. Rabbi Mentlik was the Rosh Yeshiva. All the videos of the Rebbe, for the first more than 35 years, he's the one filling the Rebbe's becher. He stood to the Rebbe's right, had a red beard and later a white beard. He was the Rebbe's Meshadas. He used to pour the Rebbe's wine for Kiddush. He would also pour the wine by Kesha Bracha. Rabbi Mentlik was a Goan. Rabbi Mentlik was a very big Talmud Chacham. He was a very, very big Lamdan, a very deep, deep Lamdan. And he served the Rebbe. The Rebbe once said in the Fabreng, I heard the Chazar, I wasn't there, Ich hab des Chus, as Edes mir mishamish. The Rebbe said, I have this Chus, that he serves me. Rabbi Mentlik stood by Fabrengen like a statue of marble. Strange people, non-Lubavitchers, would walk in and they would say, who's that man? Because he stood by the Rebbe, be'ema v'fachad. He didn't budge. I mean, there are stories where the Rebbe Pashut got him shikah. The Rebbe gave him to drink mashke, and he got him plaster drunk. And he stood. And the Rebbe walked out, he fell to the ground. But as long as the Rebbe was in the room, The bittul that he had for the Rebbe was one of a kind. He stood in front of the Rebbe, be'ema v'fachat. Rabbi Mentlik never went upstairs. For the 20 years that the Rebbe had all the students of Yontif upstairs, Rabbi Mentlik would not go upstairs. Had Rabbi Mentlik gone upstairs, who knows, maybe he would have been the Rebbe's Mesharos upstairs also. Rabbi Mentlik said, any place where the Rebbe is not sitting at the head of the table, I'm not going to be there. That was his hergish. Bam Friedrich and Rebbe upstairs, he sat on the side, just like he did before. And Rabbi Mentlik said, if the Rebbe is not at the head of the table, I'm not there, which was a big Mesidas Nefesh. And it's a window into his kashas, the kind of man he was. His bittul for the Rebbe was really, really extraordinary. But there was one exception to this rule, that the Rebbe didn't speak. If you spoke to him, he would answer. The Rebbe sat by Friedrich and Bamtish, and he sat mamish as if the Friedrich was physically present. But if you would say something to him, he would answer. And there was a very unusual opportunity. These meals of Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos were unusual because you could raise any topic you wanted. The Rebbe didn't start the conversation, you did. And people use the opportunity to ask the Rebbe many questions. Unfortunately, the vast majority of those conversations are lost because it wasn't until the last few years that people realized how meaningful these conversations are, and they began to write them down. We have 2 volumes called HaMelech B'Msibe about these Sudas upstairs, but 90% of it is the last couple of years. Chav Ches and Chav Tes. There's so many conversations that are lost because people didn't think much of it. The Rebbe was talking to somebody, and to think that every word the Rebbe says you have to write down, it took a long time for people to realize that if you're not going to write it down, you're just not going to remember. But the Rebbe would almost never initiate a conversation. If you asked him, he would respond. At the last few years, it became much more formal. The Chassidim it was harder to talk to the Rebbe Azoi. So it became that the Rashag would ask questions. The Rebbe's brother-in-law would ask questions. And the Rebbe would answer him. And it became a Seder that people used to feed the Rashag questions. People go over to the Rashag before and say, maybe ask the Rebbe this, maybe ask the Rebbe this. And the Rashag would ask, and the Rebbe would answer. One of the people who would ask the Rebbe questions often through the Rashag was Rabbi Marlow. Unfortunately, you don't remember him. He's gone more than 20 years. He was Arav. He was a big Yerei Shamayim and a big Chassid and a big Lamdan and a big Rov. And he would ask Rashag to ask the Rebbe questions. And oftentimes, when the Rashag would ask questions to Rabbi Marlow, the Rebbe would say, I'm not going to answer it now. I'll talk about it b'fabrengen tomorrow, and everybody will hear. Rabbi Marlow asked good questions. But people used to feed the Rashag questions, and he would ask the Rebbe. But for these 20 years that the Rebbe ate the meals upstairs, it was an opportunity for people to ask, to be involved with the Rebbe in a less than 100% formal way. Now the house was open. So there were 10 guests or so sitting at the table, sometimes more, and anybody who would walk in, So you're walking into somebody's house. That's what it is, a Friedrich house. Now you walk to somebody else's house. If you walk into someone else's house uninvited, right? How are you supposed to behave? You're supposed to be very delicate, right? You were not invited. The door's open, they're not kicking you out. But you have to behave. So in the beginning, they behaved. But the crowds grew bigger and bigger. And I don't know how to say this nicely, so I'll say it not nicely. As the Rebbe became more and more of a Rebbe, we treated him less and less like a person. Which I don't mean in a positive way. He was the Rebbe, so there were different rules. And it got to a point where in the Friedrich Rebbe's apartment, there were fights. Who stood where? They let people in, but they expected you to behave. It's not your home. You're not invited. You're coming in, you want to observe what's going on. Be a mensch. But it became so many people, so they locked the doors. They didn't let anybody in. Okay, the only exception, from what I understand, with the Sederim of Pesach, the Rebbe asked they should leave the doors open because the Bacham should see how the Rebbe makes a Seder. I don't know all the particulars about this, when they locked the doors and how the Rebbe made Pesach an exception and whether there were other exceptions. But the meals of Yom Tif that the Rebbe had upstairs were certainly a special moment. They were very special. And those who remember it and had the schus to be there have very special kind of memories from that seer. The Rebbe sitting bamtish near the Friedrich Rebbe, let's say at the head of the table. So the Rebbe sat to the left. The Rebbe sat to the left. The Rashag sat here, the Rebbe sat here, Reb Shmuel Levit was the Rebbe's neighbor always. And the Rebbe sat there like as if the Friedrich Rebbe was physically present. She used to arrange, the Rebbe Medina would put down by her husband's place chale, covered with a napkin and a becher, and on Pesach, obviously, matzah, and nobody touched it. That's how it was. Just one final thing before I get to the Seder itself. When the Rebbes in Chamadina passed away, the Rashag asked the Rebbe to continue coming to the Sudas. He wanted to sit by the Seder together with the Rebbe, as he had done for 20 years. And the Rebbe told him, Pesach will be alone. Pesach wouldn't be alone. That means the Rebbe and the Rebbes. And that's what happened. As soon as the Rebbe in Chamadina passed away, the Rebbe's meals of Yom Tov became completely private. There was nobody there. It was the Rebbe and the Rebbe's then. Shalom Gansberg, who sat with them at the Seder for all the rest of the years. And when the Rebbe Achei Temimim passed away, the Rebbe literally made the Seder himself. I don't know if you know this, there was a boy whose name was Ari Halberstam, who was killed at Kiddush Hashem. His yahrzeit was a few days ago. And when the Rebbe passed away, he went over to the Rebbe and said that they're inviting the Rebbe to come to their Seder. So the Rebbe shouldn't be by himself. And the Rebbe said loud and with joy, the Seder I'm going to have, spoke in English, the Seder I'm going to have with my father-in-law. That's what the Rebbe said. The Seder I'm going to have with my father-in-law. And the Rebbe stayed in his room, and he made the Seder all by himself. I'm talking about Memches, Memtes, Nun, and Aleph, and so on. The Seder I'm going to have with my father-in-law. But there was always someone in 770, and from what I understand, you could hear the Rebbe saying the Haggadah. He did it quick. It didn't take him a lot of time. He didn't say Divrei Torah to himself. You could hear the Rebbe singing the whole Haggadah. The Rebbe washed, the Rebbe ate Moitzi, Matzah, Mor, Kedesh, Shulchan Aruch, and then at some point the Rebbe walked out for Shvei HaMoscha. And the secretary was supposed to come back at 11 o'clock, and the Rebbe got to Shvei HaMoscha before 11 o'clock, and the poor Bocher who was on duty, who was, the Rebbe walks out of his room, should I go here or should I go here? There's two ways to go to Shvei HaMoscha. He was just supposed to be there in case of emergency, and now the Rebbe comes out of his room, and the person who was supposed to open the door wasn't there. So the Rebbe says to him, here or here. So he said, go this way, because there's fewer steps, and you have to run around the Rebbe and unlock the front door of 770 for the Rebbe to Shvei HaMoscha. But that's how the Rebbe expressed himself, the Seder I'm going to make with my father-in-law. So such people, I guess, are never lonely, right? The Rebbe was by himself. Before that, it was Nebuch. There's no Nebuch. The Rebbe and the Rebbes inside by the Seder, all by themselves with Shalom Gansberg. But anyway, that's... Shalom Gansberg lived in the Rebbe's house for many, many years, lived in the house. And he sat at every Shabbos meal. He used to serve the food. But let's get to the Seder, okay? The first story is the Rebbe Rayatz passes away, Yud Shvat. Now it's 2 months later, right? And the Rebbe makes a Seder upstairs by Friedrich and Rebbe. The Rebbe is not officially Rebbe, and the place of Friedrich Rebbe is set. I would imagine that the mood in the apartment was pretty depressed. It was 2 months after the Salkas of Friedrich Rebbe, and no one came. Nobody showed up. When the Friedrich Rebbe was alive, from all over Brooklyn, people came to 770, and not necessarily Lubavitchers, all kinds of Chassidim. The Friedrich Rebbe was an address in New York, and people came from Brownsville, people came from Williamsburg, people from East New York, people came from Borough Park. And the Seder in Yeni Yoram was that you used to bring your Achei Temimim. A lot of people would make their Seder at home, come to 770 with their Achei Temimim, and hope that allowed them to eat the Achei Temimim in the Friedrich Rebbe's apartment. The problem was the Friedrich Rebbe was not well. So they used to come from all over Brooklyn to 770, and there were 2 sets of stairs. I don't know how well you know upstairs at 770. There's a set of stairs right by the Rebbe's room, which you've seen many times. But there's another set of stairs halfway down the hall, which is called the metal staircase, which opens up into the kitchen. But Chaim and Friedrich and Rebbe, they didn't wait by the staircase near the Rebbe's room. They waited by the metal staircase because they wanted to go to the back of the house, because that's where the dining room was. They wanted to have the schus to eat their kazayis matzah in the Friedrich Rebbe's room. And didn't let always people, sometimes they'd let people in, you'd go in, you'd have to come in, and then you'd walk out. Because the Friedrich Rebbe had a problem of breathing, and there had to be hit a lot of fresh air, and people took the air out of the room. It was very hard for him. So oftentimes people would come from all over Brooklyn and end up eating the Achei Temimim on the steps. They wouldn't let him in. They would eat the Achei Temimim on the steps. They wouldn't let him in. So the Rebbe says, last year the doors were locked, and hundreds of people came, or scores of people came from all over Brooklyn, and they didn't even let him in. Today, Allah Tibbin is not enough, and all the doors are open and nobody came. This is the first Seder, Yud Shvat, Pesach Tov Shin Yud. The Rebbe says, I don't understand. Last year so many people came. How come no one came to the Achei Temimim but the Rebbe? And the Rebbe qualified that the fact that the Friedrich Rebbe was here for 10 years With the letzte koiches, the last energies, dort gedaven, and dort gelernt. This is where he davened. This is where he learned. And the Rebbe is gedrickt, es ken nicht ein kein größere Gilui for them. There could be no greater Gilui of a Rebbe than this. And the Rebbe said, if the Frierdiker Rebbe was here, the Frierdiker Rebbe is still here, so why don't you come? So the second night Pesach, everybody came. Went to Achei Temimim, they let them all in, and they ate Achei Temimim. This is before the Rebbe was a Rebbe. Now there was an anomaly that he said it in shul the next day, Mistama.
And like the voice spread?
Yeah. One of the anomalies of that night was that the Rebbe did Haseba, the Rebbe leaned. But Chayef and Frierdiker and Rebbe, by the Rebbe's table, only the Rebbe did Haseba. All the men sat up when they drank the wine and the matzah and the koirach. You didn't do an Achei Temimim, you didn't do a Seder by Rebbe. By a Rebbe, only the Rebbe does a Seder. Now the Rebbe kept on screaming that the Rebbe is alive, and when it comes to the Seder, he's doing a Seder. So somebody said to the Rebbe, I don't understand you. You're screaming the whole day that the Rebbe is alive, and mitamo, when it comes to Nigle, to the Dalet Kaisis, the Rebbe lean, to the Matzah, the Rebbe lean, for the Koirach, the Rebbe lean. So the Rebbe said, when it comes to Zachen von Halacha, seien die alle in Yonim nit negehen. In other words, the Rebbe was speaking up in Pnimis HaYonim, that the Rebbe is alive, but Abi Halacha, since physically the Frierdiker Rebbe was not halachically, physically present, so the Rebbe did Haseba. Now once the Rebbe became Rebbe, our Rebbe became Rebbe, they again didn't do Haseba because they were sitting not in front of the Frierdiker Rebbe, they were sitting in front of the Rebbe. The Rashag did not lean. When the Rebbe was a Rebbe, Mistama that first year he also leaned, but once the Rebbe was a Rebbe and the Rashag accepted that, when the Rebbe sat there for those 20 years till Tafshan Lamed, our Rebbe was the only one who did a Seder, and nobody else did a Seder, not because they were in the presence of the Frierdiker Rebbe, but because they were in the presence of the Rebbe. Now, there is a minik, which is brought in Sefer HaMinhagim, which says that you're supposed to have a silver tray under the kaida. Okay? You're supposed to have a silver tray under the kaida. Now, it does not necessarily be silver, it's supposed to be a plate for the Kabbalists keeping score at home, and of course you're all Kabbalists. The 3 matzahs are Chacham Bina Badas, the 6 types on top. Beit Ezraya, it goes in the 6 midas, and the plate underneath is Malchus, so it's 3 plus 6 plus 1 is 10. It corresponds to the 10 Sfidas. So it says in Minhagim as follows. In the Beis Harav, in the Rebbe's house, only the Rebbe uses a tray, nobody else does. But the implication is that in your own home, in other words, the way I understand it is, when you make a Seder, soon you'll make a Seder for your husband, the value you make a Seder with your parents, underneath the kaida, whatever you use for a kaida, is a plate. And on top of the plate you have the 3 matzahs, separated by napkins, and on top of the matzahs you have the minim. Okay? So, B'chaya for Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe didn't use a plate. He was sitting by the Frierdiker Rebbe's table. But the Frierdiker Rebbe's table, only the Frierdiker Rebbe had a tray. In Tafshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe had to label Groner. This is Rabbi Groner's new book, Hamaskir. I gotta go get myself a tray. Chachafil, the Rebbe hates claimish, not a Rebbe. The Rebbe wrote the bittel and so on and so forth. The Rebbe went and bought a silver tray. I don't know who bought it for him. It's a rectangular tray, just pictures of it. It doesn't look like very much to me. It's not round. It's rectangular, like for a tray for neshek, you know. No, it's silver. It's real silver, like for Shabbos candles. And the Rebbe had labeled Groner Toivelit, and then the Rebbe wrapped it in paper. In other words, you didn't see the tray. The Rebbe came to the Seder with a silver tray, but it was covered over. And again, the presumption is that this was because he was sitting Bamfiri and Bamtish. So he did it, but he did it in his life. And I doubt, I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming that at home, the Rebbe used a silver tray, didn't necessarily wrap it in paper. By the way, there's a Lashon Hara that somebody bought the Rebbe a gold becher, 100% gold. And that when the Rebbe had the Seder in his home, he used it. That's a shmua. If the Rebbe had a gold, not a silver becher. Oftentimes when you buy silver bechers, the inside is gold. Did you ever notice that? It's real gold. It's gold layer, gold plating. Because wine and silver equals lead poisoning. But the gold doesn't last. Every new becher has gold on the inside. After 5 years, the gold on the inside is gone. Because it's just a plate. The Rebbe had I heard, a completely gold becher, and a Yid, Rabban Klein, bought it to see everything to the Rebbe as a gift. And the rumor is, and I never missed a rumor, and I don't necessarily trust him, but the rumor is that the Rebbe used it at home. When he sat with the Rebbe Tzachayim Mushka. But by the meal upstairs, the Rebbe used a silver becher. This is a parenthesis. The Rebbe was very weary of using anything expensive because he knew that whatever he does, the Chassidim are going to imitate. The Rebbe did not use a silver decanter for wine. The Rebbe did not use a silver box for an esrig, and the Rebbe said he used a cardboard box for his esrig. The Rebbe used a glass bottle for wine. And the Rebbe said, if I'm going to do it, the Chassidim are going to do it, not if they can afford it, ich darf es nicht. The one exception, I told you about this, was the Megillah case. That was silver, was a gift from Rebbe Bashkin, this the Rebbe used. And again, if it's true, the Rebbe used the golden becher, but he only did it when nobody was around. He did it in private.
Then how do we know? Yeah.
Because it wasn't that private. Shalom Gansberg was there. Now, so the Rebbe came to the Seder with a silver tray, and he brought the matzahs with him. The matzahs the Rebbe brought from his room, and the wine the Rebbe brought from his room. What time did the Seder start upstairs? Maybe 9 o'clock, maybe 9:30. In other words, it wasn't right after Maidev. What time is Maidev at Pesach time? Right now, Maidev is probably around 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Right, closer to Pesach will be a little later. The Seder didn't start till 9 o'clock, maybe even later. I mentioned to the girls in the previous group that the first night, the Rebbe took a walk. He went to visit the Bachrim and the girls in the different public stodim in Crown Heights. The Rebbe also give people matzah. Certain people got a matzah before the Seder.
You went to the girls?
He went out to Machon yeah, not to Beis Rivka, Machon. Yeah. And the Rebbe used to give certain people a whole matzah. So the Seder started at 9 or 9:30, I don't know what it was. I heard from people that the Bachrim used to rush through their Seder and dash to the Rebbe's house because they wanted to see the whole Seder. Sometimes the Bachrim would arrive before the Seder even started. And they had gotten till Borech. They did Achei Temimim already. And somebody once described to me walking into the Rebbe's apartment, and the only person there was the Rebbe. The Rebbe started getting ready for that Seder. Other people hadn't even arrived. The Rebbe brought with him his Sidurim. He brought with him his own Haggadah. The Rebbe's Haggadah was originally a little blue pamphlet with 2 columns. It's been changed. The Haggadah with the Rebbe's notes, the Rebbe used to use his own Haggadah, which was a blue pamphlet, which the Rebbe used. And he brought along also Seder Abshapsi, a Seder Arizal, a Kabbalah, and the whole night, the Rebbe was looking back and forth between his Haggadah and the Kisvei Arizal, because the Rebbe did things, and it looked, you just glancing back and forth. You didn't see the Rebbe swinging his arms, but the Rebbe was doing things up in Kabbalah. The Rebbe had the Seder Arizal open, and his own Haggadah, and he would look back and forth the whole night. The Rebbe davened the Haggadah quickly, he said it very quietly, and you would see the Rebbe looking back and forth. And the Rebbe brought matzah from his room, and the Rebbe brought wine. Girls, there's one thing which is an undeniably obvious thing. Every Babasha sees it. And Ada Yei Mazeh, I know so few people who imitate it. But we love to imitate the Rebbe, right? What's an example of something we saw the Rebbe do thousands of times that we don't imitate? The Rebbe kept his wine covered in a brown paper bag. Always. Richtig to nicht richtig. Every Fabrengen, you watch weekday Fabrengens, Rabbi Mentlik is pouring the Rebbe's wine. It's a regular bottle, right? In those days it was called Genelas Lager Unleaded Special. It tasted like garbage. It didn't taste like the wine that we drink now. And the Rebbe drank the same wine as we did. Pesach, the Rebbe had homemade wine. A whole year the Rebbe drank the same. The Rebbe's wine was always covered in a paper bag, even if it was mevushal. I don't do it, and I don't know why. It's really, of course we should do it. Rabbi Marlow used to put his wine in a paper bag. It's interesting. This is one of those menhagim which you could see with your fleischige Augen. I don't know why. It's one of those weird anomalies. The Rebbe came to the Seder with a bottle of wine, which was homemade, so it was not mevushal, in the paper bag, and he kept it on the floor. He didn't put it on the table. He put it on the floor. A whole year, the Rebbe's wine was poured for him by Rabbi Mentlich. By the Seder, the Rebbe poured his own wine. There's an Indian of Pesach of derechedus. Derechedus means somebody should serve you. And pulled by the Seder, the Rebbe is filling up his own cup. It's an Indian. Again, if Rabbi Mentlich had been upstairs, would it have been different? It's very hard to know. The Rebbe didn't keep his bottle of wine on the table. He kept it on the floor in that brown paper bag. He would get up himself and pick it up and fill up his becher during the 4 times that you need to fill the becher during the Haggadah. The Rebbe brought the matzah and the wine and the Haggadahs from downstairs, and the minim were on the table. So the Rebbe used this plate which was covered.
Yeah, I have a question that I don't know if it's related to this, but it's short. Basically, how the Rebbe held to the tablecloth when the Rebbe was farming, right? Like under the table.
Why are you asking? I'm just curious.
Because was it only during Farbrengens?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I was a little kid.
Okay.
My brother and I climbed underneath the floor. We came out like a chimney. It was so dirty down there.
I didn't realize that.
And I was mamish under Rebbe's feet. Rebbe's feet's on a stage, yeah? We were underneath that stage as a permanent stage. They haven't cleaned down there in 60 years. My brother and I cleaned it. We were not the only kids. But I remember the Rebbe sitting under that table and his hands and his feet. You look at the Rebbe at Farbrengen and he looks like he's sitting calm. I'm like gewarfen. Not just during a maimer, during a sicha. The Rebbe's hands and his feet were moving vigorously the whole time. And he was holding onto the tablecloth. Not necessarily during a maimer, as I stand. But it was interesting. You looked at the Rebbe at Farbrengen, the Rebbe looks completely calm. Under the table, his hands and his feet are doing work. Mamish was the whole time. I witnessed this as a little child, so do I remember it correctly? But if I remember correctly, he held a tablecloth. But okay, let's get back to Pesach. So the Rebbe used to use, I think it was napkins between the matzahs, or cloth napkins maybe, and then on top of the matzahs he put down the minim. If I'm not mistaken, he put the minim directly on the napkins. In other words, the Rebbe didn't. What I do is I use a piece of paper that I got from the Rebbe. So I put a bunch of napkins so that the mortar, which is wet, shouldn't touch the matzah. From what I understand was the Rebbe would dry the mortar, and he put it directly on the napkin, which on top of the koyin. And the Rebbe he would set the kaida himself in his own kaida. He would, the plate, napkin, matzah, napkin, and then he put the zroya, the beya. So the Rebbe put the egg down, and it sat there, And the Rebbe's egg didn't roll off. Even when he picked up his kaida, what we do is you bang the egg until one side becomes flat. So it sits on the kaida. The Rebbe's egg sat, we put it just because he told him to sit there. The mored is azoy. The Rebbe dried the mored a lot. You're supposed to dry the mored because the mored has water on it, and the water is a shala from shruya. The Rebbe would dry the mored. He put it on the kaida. The Rebbe took not normal amounts of mored, of horseradish. The Rebbe used to take the ground mored and put it in his hand and squeeze it until he had a massive glob of mored, a gigantic glob of mored. The Rebbe would squeeze it onto the floor, it was mamish, a solid, compact glob of mored, and he put it on the kaida. The Rebbe also used pieces of mored. When the Rebbe ate mored, they had to open the window. They couldn't catch his breath. The Rebbe ate copious amount of mored. It's strange. Mored is midrabanan. Matzah is midiraisa. The Rebbe's shurim of matzah was small. The Rebbe's shurim of mored were incredibly large. And again, that's how it was described to me. The Rebbe would dry the leaves very, very much and put them on the kaida. And the mored, he would take, like I said before, take a spoon and squeeze out the juice from the geribene, from the ground mored, to make a glob, which was much more than a kazayas. And then on top of that, he would put pieces. He did it for mored and for chazeres. So the Rebbe, people would come, if you came early enough, you could watch the Rebbe prepare the Seder. And then they made Kiddush, and then they washed, and the whole thing. I have to let you go. I'm just going to say one more thing before I let you go, is that when the Rebbe made Kiddush, I don't know how they did it with the Rashag. The Chamadina was very concerned with the Rashag's covet. The Rashag was older than the Rebbe. But I'm imagining that the Rebbe made Kiddush first. I can't imagine that Rashag made Kiddush for the Rebbe. She always used to tell the Bacharim that when they serve the Rebbe and the Rashag, they have to put the food on at the same time. So the Bacharim would serve. So they would always make sure to put on the Rebbe's a drop before the Rashags, but not so much before that you can say that it wasn't at the same time. I'm assuming that the Rebbe made Kiddush first. The Rebbetzin would appear in the doorway. There's a big room. So at the end of the room, there's a door that opens up into a dinette. There's two little rooms next to the kitchen. And somebody told me that when the Rebbe made Kiddush, he made it very softly. Nobody could hear the Kiddush. And the Rebbe said, Amen, and all the Rebbe's brachas. The Rebbe made Kiddush very, very softly. And the Rebbe did a Seder. And then the Rebbe went to wash. And I'll do this with the next group. I'll see you when I see you.